So, question for you.
Hmm.
You are an aspiring creative, and can you tell us just a little bit about your background coming to Los Angeles and what your long-term goal is?
Yeah, of course. So I went to film school at Mizzou, which is where we met, um, and got involved in the film program there. At the same time, was an English major, and I was starting to write stories kind of from the time I was a freshman. Then jumped into the film world when I was a sophomore, writing screenplays and stuff. My first class in the program actually was screenwriting, and kind of fell in love with that right away. Um, and then it just took off from there. I wrote more and more and started to produce more and more films with my friends, with you, and decided to make the move out to LA, and got a job at a talent agency, and I've been involved with writers and producers and agents and people ever since. So that is
Yeah,
my that's
what
my
a whack,
start right there.
what a wacky string out that
Mhm.
is, right? You never
Yeah,
really imagine it happening exactly how it did. I always look
yeah,
back and I'm like, wow, we've done a lot in just the past couple of years. It's just a lot has
I know.
changed, and that's what I love about being this age, though. It allows you to explore those opportunities and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I kind of
Yeah.
want to go back and ask about how you said in sophomore year was really
Hmm.
where your addiction with writing kind of developed.
Hmm.
Was that new to you, or have you always been writing from an early age?
It was pretty new. So I kind of started my sophomore year in high school. So we were talking sophomore year in college. My sophomore year in high school was when first kind of, I had my first teacher, I guess, who turned me onto the track. She was my journalism teacher. Um, and that was just writing feature stories for the newspaper and the yearbook. And that was that simple, finding unique angles into people's lives who went to my school. Um, and so I did that. My teacher really encouraged me. She really loved to hone all of our writing skills and push us. And then it went on from there. I went to Mizzou to originally be a journalism major, partially because of her and because of my interests that I found I had. And then at Mizzou, I found I found the classes to be engaging in the journalism school. I mean, it's world famous J school, but I wanted to do something a little more creative to test my ability to tell stories in different ways. And so that's when sophomore year came around, and I transitioned into that filmmaking, screenwriting phase, and got more involved with that.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I'm kind of a little bit of a similar route where I had general interest in film and that aspect of everything. However, I didn't really know I wanted to take it seriously until college. And a lot of people ask me, is it necessary to go to college? Is it necessary to do that with, the internet now, and you can learn anything online basically? But I think the biggest thing that at least Mizzou did for myself, and probably you as well, is it allowed you to kind of sit down with your interests and explore them a little bit and decide which ones were working and which ones weren't, right? I kind of
Mhm.
did a similar thing where sophomore year, about that time, I was also in journalism and I had no idea really what I wanted to do, but I really loved going out and creating content like news packages, right? And then I really liked that process, but there was something lacking, and it was the creativity side. And I think a lot of people kind of transition from journalism to different things like film studies or communication or something along those routes because of that pull, right? Where you have to, there's something extra missing, right?
Yeah.
So long story short, that's how we know each other from back
Yes.
back
Yeah.
at college, and
Mhm.
we connected
And a
out
crazy trip to
here.
Ireland too. Mhm.
Correct. Yeah, we went on a. That's a whole other story, though. We went to
Mhm.
Ireland on a study abroad trip.
Mhm.
Uh, but most importantly, I wanted to kind of pick your brain on what it means being like a younger artist out in this city, and you know, I guess how
Mhm.
exactly you're taking yourself seriously in a world with so much competition, right? I think that's something we all struggle with is
Yeah.
how did you say, make that big decision that you're moving across the country essentially to pursue this craft? And how was that decision, first of all? And then secondly, how do you take yourself that seriously in such a big pool?
Yeah, definitely. I think let's start with the move out to Los Angeles. I think that's a good place to start because I think it's where a lot of people are starting these days. They know they want to be in the field. They don't know what part. They might not know what their specific interest is, but the first big step is making that move to a city where you can explore your creative interests. So that first step for me was about taking the risk, saving up the money, working a job that wasn't, super appealing to me, but what I knew would get me to the financial place where I was ready to take that risk and go out to LA and search for the creative lifestyle that you described. So, what I would say is that, you just have to trust that when you move out here, you're going to put yourself to work, finding that community, the job, that's going to point you in the right direction.
Yeah. I remember the feeling when I first moved out here. I was one of my first people in my friend group, I guess, to move out here. And I just remember being dropped off in basically this large jungle of a wasteland called Los Angeles, and kind of looking around and being like, yo, like, this is a big world and I don't know exactly how I'm going to place my feet. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And over the years, you kind of get your footing and you kind of develop networks and communities and, you get to know all the different cliques and how they work in the city and all the different industries that it offers and all that stuff. Because there's sub industries of every industry,
of course. Yeah.
I love that.
And you mentioned you mentioned competition too, just to cover that question as well, because that's a tough one, is how to sort yourself out and be be unique. Everyone wants to be their own unique artist.
Right. So you mentioned that making the decision to move was pretty hard, and actually coming here is hard, right? And getting your footing. Very. So that's a really good segue into, how do you make that decision to take yourself that seriously, right? To move across the country and pursue it.
Yeah. And I like that question a lot because I think a lot of artists think of, you're thinking about, it's just the natural course of the craft is, there's a little bit of ego that goes into every artist. It's just the way it is. You are essentially saying to the world that you have something to say. And that's hard. It's hard to take yourself seriously and to know exactly what that is that you are wanting to say to people. So what I like to do, to get specific with it, is I like to kind of separate it based on each project I'm working on. Instead of trying to brand myself as an artist or, brand myself as one thing or the other, I just focus on whatever project I'm on, and I try and create the concrete vision for what that project is and what it means to me. And I try and, I just try and build that project from square one, up until it's complete. So, and it helps me kind of keep my mind out of that dangerous, that dangerous territory where you start to wonder if you're taken seriously or if you're taking yourself seriously
So why do it in the first place? Like what are kind of the top couple reasons that fuel you to write, right? So I guess mainly, I don't know how many people know you that are watching this, but if someone were to approach you, you would classify yourself as a writer, correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So what inspires you to write, and what would you do it if no one was watching?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's
That's
like
good. That's the
a
really
lot
good,
of
right?
a lot of artists. It's like, you're just gonna do it no matter what, because it's what you believe in. It's what
Mhm.
you enjoy spending your time doing.
Yeah.
So what empowers you to do it, and
Mhm.
maybe relate that to taking yourself seriously? It's not
Yeah.
really about how others perceive you. It's about
Mhm.
doing the work that you think you
Yeah.
need to do as an artist.
Yeah. Yeah. So first of all, I think that I do it because it keeps me sane. It allows me to process my emotions. Um, it allows me to explore new territory, new worlds. It brings something exciting and new to every single day that you're looking at something new. You're considering ideas in a new way from a new perspective. In terms of, why do it? Um, I think we all have the chance to be in conversation with each other. Um, and we have the chance to do it in a unique way that attracts attention to the conversation and encourages people to engage and join, you know. Um,
Yeah.
so for example, I mean, I'm watching a show, rewatching one of my favorite shows right now that I'm sure I've texted you a bunch about, which is The Wire. It's like one of HBO's great shows, and it's kind of all about the street players and cops in Baltimore. And I would have no idea how to enter that conversation um, if I hadn't watched the show. And who knows if I ever would have joined in. But now all of a sudden, this show has me thinking about it, discussing it with other people. Wondering what kind of socioeconomic dynamics are present where I live in Los Angeles versus where I live here in Utah. So the it sets a precedent for
It's like a
our
doorway. It's like a
yeah.
doorway into another
Mhm.
world, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, all of a sudden we're having these important conversations that we might not have had before or might not have considered, and that is just the window that art provides.
Yeah, I love that.
Mhm.
And
And
do you
in
feel
terms of
like
writing, I always say to you, writing's free. So I mean, you get a Word document and you can do it.
right,
So makes
exactly,
it's pretty
or
easy in that
or
sense.
even
Hmm.
more free than that, and get
Hmm.
the back of a receipt paper,
Yeah, get a
and
stick and
bang,
draw in the
you can
sand.
externalize your
In the
thoughts
sand,
in
right in the
the real
sand.
world. Yeah.
Hmm.
The thing that fascinates me
Yeah.
about human ideas and the writing process too is like that this thing just starts as these chemical emotions
Hmm.
or connections, right, in our brains, and then they're externalized into the world through that tool, right? Whether it's a
Hmm.
book or a news article or a feature film, you're basically like just translating a world that you've created into reality, which is so dope. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
So long story short, if you were stuck on an island with nothing to do, basically, you're the only one there, you would
Yeah.
still sit down and write.
I think so. Yeah. I think at the very least on an island, it would help pass the time and
Right,
keep
right.
keep me
Yeah.
from going crazy.
Yeah.
So,
So they just lift up the sheet and all it just says is Wilson over and over again.
yep. Yeah. Mhm. I mean, you can only go around tallying the days you've been on the island for so
Right.
long. And
Yeah.
playing.
So we've kind of talked about, taking yourself seriously as an artist, actually moving out to where most of the opportunities are,
Mhm.
making certain sacrifices to put yourself in that position, right? Can you talk about different things you've had to sacrifice, even since being out here, to pursue writing? Like, what does your day job essentially look like, and
Mhm.
when do you find time to actually
Yeah.
write?
Yeah. So for any new artist, there are sacrifices. It's just the way it goes. That's one thing, to go back to the conversation about college and why it's so great to pursue one of those majors in college, is because you'll have the chance to do that as your day-to-day routine for how many ever years it takes you to get your degree. So now that you're in the working world, you are worrying about connections and meeting people, and building your portfolio. my job is I work a 10-hour-a-day job. So it's fairly demanding. I am at work at 9 and I come home at 7. So I choose to do my work before my personal creative work before work. I get up early and I do it. So
yeah. Do you find that doing it after work is a little bit too draining in terms of energy?
Mm-hmm. It took me a long time to figure that out. 'Cause I just didn't want to wake up early. I didn't want to accept that I had to wake up early to do it. But
Right.
after a 10-hour day, it was not possible for me, and then trying to throw other things into the equation as well, if you are meeting with coworkers or whatnot. And
those certain sacrifices, they suck in the moment and they never stop sucking, right?
Yeah.
But if you win more than you lose, you feel very accomplished, because the satisfaction you probably get of having your little day before your workday starts is pretty significant, right?
Yeah. It's nice. It gives me a really good mindset at work, knowing that I already got the creative work that's important to me done. Then I'm able to go to work and I'm able to really take in the creative setting and the true geniuses that I'm surrounded by. It's unbelievable. For those of you who don't know, I work at Creative Artists Agency. And so that is, that's just it's a insane world where you're dealing with artists who they can pull off the craziest stunts. They can make anything into art. And
it's a collection of the world's top talent, right?
Yeah. And so you're on the business side of that and you're seeing that. And so you get to experience, that important side of the business as well, from reading scripts.
So I have a question on that, actually. Before we get back into your writing personally, I want to take a little detour. Can you elaborate a little bit on understanding the business side of art?
Yeah.
As opposed to back when you didn't know too much about it, because it is totally necessary. The whole monetary side is totally necessary for artists to grow and be sustainable. And how much of that did you know before working at CAA? And how has your brain kind of been shifted a little bit in that world?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. So the truth is that 2 years ago, I couldn't have told you what CAA was. I wouldn't have had any idea. But I got the job there just through searching through LinkedIn, not to plug any service or anything, but
sponsored by LinkedIn.
Yeah. Sponsored by LinkedIn.
Yeah.
It works really well. And I just reached out to, an agent there and asked them what CAA was all about. And they kind of gave me the rundown. So you'll hear a lot of creative people talk about wanting to get an agent, that being an important part of the process. That's what CAA is. We're an agency. So agents pretty much broker deals between people that want to buy the art and the people that make the art. They negotiate the contracts. They, set the monetary amount that their client will receive. And in turn, they take a small percentage of what their client earns.
Right. And they do a lot in terms of just general management too, and making sure everything is just a smooth process for the artist, especially at the level of talent that they're working with, that you need a team behind you. If you're an artist that has a lot of attention, and with a lot of attention brings a lot of potential resources that you need to manage. And the most important thing for the artist is doing their art, right? Yeah. So all the other stuff kind of goes away when you have such an agency, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
It's just understanding the unbelievable amount of priorities and different factors that are in a professional artist's life. Someone like Lady Gaga, for example, who she is an actress, she's a musician, she has a philanthropy presence, and so there's so much to manage and to do with a client like that.
Right.
And so like you said, it's just, it is a part of the business that is designed to make it easier for an artist to focus on their art, and bring their art and their vision and their ideas to all aspects of their life.
Right. So have you learned anything that you can apply to your own career route planning as you kind of pursue becoming a writer?
Yeah.
What are the key things that you've identified that you can kind of implement into your future plan on how to become a published writer?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. So I think that a lot of the things that you learn at the agency, they don't have to necessarily do with the specific aspects of business. It's not as if I'm learning how to fill out a contract a special way that'll get me a better chance at being hired in a writer's room in the future. You know, that's just on you to do the work as an artist and grow. But what you do learn is how to interact with people and show them that you can listen and learn how to listen to people. I think the reality is that we all make mistakes in our professional and personal lives. We say the wrong, I mean, I have a big mouth. I say things sometimes that I just want to say. And you learn in a professional setting how to handle yourself, how to put on a suit and tie and interact as if you were part of the business, because that's what your end goal is, you know. And it gives you, I started in the mailroom, and so from there you have a position in the company where you can learn from the ground up, you know. And it starts with making relationships, building those relationships with people. And the reality is you're not going to move up until you show the respect that your colleagues deserve, and you learn, you know,
right,
how to communicate effectively. So,
I think that a lot of us as artists, we kind of have these back of the voice ego things where we're like, you know, like, how are they there? I know I can do that way better.
Yeah.
Or maybe not to that quite extent, but you realize that, you know, it's not about that. It's about, you know, progressing as not only a person part of a company or a brand, or, you know, it's about basically like just knowing that everyone deserves respect because they've worked to get there. And
absolutely. Yeah.
and I think that's a lot to balance at especially a young artist's age, where you're like, I just want to attack the world and I want to be big, or like I want to be noticed and stuff like that. And it's really important to just take a step back and get out of your own ego, your own head, and be like, all right, what are the legitimate steps, business wise and artist wise, that I need to merge together to professionally pursue this, right?
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. Yeah.
So kind of full circle back to your writing process.
Yeah.
After that agency detour, I'm glad we talked about it though.
Yeah.
How do you actually approach sitting down and writing? You know, does it come naturally? I'm sure sometimes it might, but how do you get yourself in the mood? Because a lot of times I'll sit down to edit a video or something like that, and I'm just not quite inspired. I always ask my fellow creatives, like, what do you do to actually get in the mood and attack your projects? Yeah.
No, that's a really good question. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. Just because it's fun to be inspired. The moments of inspiration are why we do this. So I read a book kind of when I was probably again in that sophomore year, that one of, you know, that pivotal year for deciding I wanted to try and pursue this. And it was Stephen King's book on writing. It's one of his only nonfiction books. It's his memoir and discussion about the craft.
Was it 3,000 pages?
It wasn't. No, luckily it was not. But it kind of became like my holy text for motivating myself to write and for understanding what it took to want to do this. So, I mean, obviously he talks about how if you want to be a writer, you have to read a lot and you have to write a lot. And if you want to be a screenwriter, you have to watch a lot of movies and read a lot of scripts and write a lot. So I took that to heart, and every day I either go for a certain amount of words or I set a timer for a certain amount of time. So on different days, some days coffee is what inspires me more than anything. It seems like a lot of days recently.
Reaching to the choir.
During the quarantine.
Yeah.
On some days you go for a walk outside or a hike and you think of something when your mind is just churning on its own. And and that's really inspiring. It's a solution to a problem that you've been battling with for a while. I can't preach enough to get outside and really use that to hone your creativeness, because it does work. And especially in moments when you're not trying to solve the problem, you're just trying to enjoy something else. There's a lot of times when the inspiration comes. But I force myself to do some work every day, an hour and a half or 2 hours of writing or editing, or 1,000 to 2,000 words. Or screenwriting, I'll do 4 or 5 pages,
Gotcha. So setting those little daily tasks that at least make you start it, right? Setting a timer to just get the pen moving, right? So
exactly.
That's something that is honestly so powerful. And a lot of the times for me personally, it's just the fact that I start it gets me going, because if you look at it mentally, you're like, oh, I have this whole video to edit. Oh, I have this whole book to write. Oh, I have this whole script to write. That's a daunting task. But when it's just like, I need to write for 15 minutes, that's my goal. And all of a sudden, once you write 2-3 sentences, then it just, it just goes, same thing with editing. It's just the fact of starting it every day is the most important part sometimes.
Yep. And it's the hardest part too. This is the reality of it, is that you are asking your brain to go from not being engaged to being completely engaged in something. And your brain is always going to resist you. For the most part, it's just going to make you work to sit down and do it. So you just have to,
there's always that resistance, right?
Yeah. There's this saying for writers that sit your ass in the chair or get your ass in the chair. And that's just so true. You have to sit down and do the work. I
love that. There's a book by, I forgot who it was by, but it's called The War of Art, or The War on Art. I'll link it below or something like that. But it's this awesome
You've talked about this
way
before,
it's this awesome way of putting that resistance. It's like, it's always going to be there, and it's always this battle. And the goal is just like one time a day, basically, you have to win against this resistance, and just bear through it. Like you said, sit your ass in the chair.
And the sooner you realize that writing a bunch of garbage, which is what happens most days, is better than writing nothing, and that there are, diamonds to be mined somewhere in all of the effort you've put in, somewhere in there's 1% of the 100% total that you've done that you can take and you can extract it and you can build upon it. And that's not going to ever be there if your page is blank, or you haven't opened your Adobe Premiere file, or your camera hasn't started rolling. So,
I love that. It's
the important part.
It's essentially just doing the act can be self-sufficient enough. There's this awesome saying that I forgot the exact quote, but it's essentially like, write and then edit rigorously, right? So it's like, who cares what it is? Just do the thing that you're passionate about, and then go back at it and revise it, right? And that's honestly the biggest thing that polishes up a lot of projects in video and writing and painting, things that can be altered after you kind of come back to take a step back and get your head away from the project. When you come back to it, and you start the revision process, that's when real things start to take shape, at least for me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is it similar? Is it similar to you?
Yeah, it is. So the revision process is something that I'm going through right now with a lot of projects. I love to just write first drafts. I will vigorously write first drafts, but when it comes to the editing, it's like pulling teeth. It's the part of the process that I'm still getting used to, which is what is real. It makes it really difficult because this is the part of the process where the success is built. So you have to learn how to do it. And in forcing myself to learn how to do it, it builds you. You don't believe what kind of thing you're going to come out with until you see it. What point A to point B looks like it will blow your mind once you've sat down and done an hour's worth of revision or rewriting.
How much does it change your original story structure when you sit down and write? A lot of times when I look back at a video, I'll turn it into a completely brand new video, but sometimes for the better. I'd say most of the time for the better. Yeah. Sometimes I'm like, what did I do? And I have to go back. Yeah. But tell me about your revision process of going back to your written ideas and how important that process is of altering those details that make it further take form.
Yeah. So I think, again, it always depends on the project. So I had a short film a few years ago, and that went through really heavy revisions. I think it was about 9 pages, and I revised it for 4 or 5 months of revising daily and reading with the cast members over Skype. And the story did not change because I had a specific theme I was honed in on, and I wanted to build the story as well and concretely around that theme as I could. So the revisions were based around preserving this theme I had.
They were additive. They were additive to the existing themes and structures.
Yeah.
And stuff.
And other times you'll write and you'll try and discover what the story is you're trying to tell. And that might change just based on your interests and what you're experimenting around with. A lot of times these days, I discover my theme in the first draft of something, and then I try and recognize that theme or that idea, and then becomes the process of, like I said, conserving that theme or building it, making it more concrete in the best way possible, whether that means ripping a character out of the story and rebuilding them, or deleting them altogether, or deleting your favorite passage. Happens all the time. It happens every project.
Because it just doesn't fit, for some reason it doesn't fit, and you're like, wow, this whole thing would be a lot stronger if that wasn't there, but it kills me to take it out. We're attached. And speaking
of, hit that delete key. You got to learn.
You got to know when, right? And speaking of attachment, at what point, this is a battle for all artists, I swear. This is like the worst thing. Because a project is never done, right? So at what point do you say, I'm letting it go, I'm shipping it out, right? Because a lot of times just saying you're done with it and getting eyeballs on it from other people, or publishing the video, or sending your book to publishers is the most important part, but it never feels quite done. Do you have any strategies regarding that? Or like, at what point do you think that, you can let go of a project? Yeah.
So a really good thing that filmmakers have, and I love this about making movies. And I listened to you and Sean's video, and you guys talked about this too, the heat and the excitement of going into battle before a film, is that film is on a deadline. So if you're a professional screenwriter, you're going to have a deadline for a project. That's how it's going to work. You're going to be in a writer's room, or you're going to have so much time to complete draft 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so that deadline is what is going to get you. You will be revising until midnight that the studio wants it. And that's just based on what I've read. I don't have any experience with that, but it's what other writers will tell you in the business. And it's what we see at CAA is our writers working.
Right. So what about for you? Let's take something really simple, like a short
Yeah.
video script, right? Like
Mhm.
a video short. At what point are you ready to send it out? After you've done multiple rounds of revisions on it, or are
Mhm.
you pretty much just always holding on to it until something happens?
Yeah, no, with a script, it's very the screenwriting like I said, the screenwriting makes it a little easier because you're going to keep refining that script, and maybe the revisions, maybe pretty one day you're doing revisions every single day, for months and months until the script is starting to look better. And then pretty soon you're doing a few less revisions. You're doing revising 2 or 3 times a week. Um, and as you begin other projects, you're going back and you're tuning things up, things that
Right.
are out of date.
Yeah.
But you're always tuning and you're always tinkering. With a novel, it can, that's when
It can ruin your life.
yeah, it can ruin your life. You hear horror stories about novelists
Yeah.
taking 5-10 years to publish their book.
Yeah. Well, it is
Yeah.
such a big thing that it makes sense, because I look at it, I mostly focus on short form content. And over the years, I almost imagine it like, I got this idea while you were talking. It's almost like you have a bookshelf behind you, and you are filling the shelves like one book at a time, right? And those books represent either an actual book or the little projects you work on, right?
Yeah.
Or the big projects you work on. They're these assets that you're kind of putting on the shelf, and then you can always go back and add on to them or tune them up,
Yeah.
or take little bits and pieces and turn it into something new. But
Yeah.
you still have all these that you're sitting on. So I think that like the whole process is very additive. Do you find yourself just going back to projects that you thought were done, but you like kind of get new ideas? Or is it ever really just like, I'm going to put a pin in this, I'm done with it, move on? Or
It can be. So that's another thing that I think is really important about the writing process is I think sometimes it is important to let your ideas go and just remember that that this is a game this is a long-term game you're playing for yourself. I've written novels that are never going to see the light of day. And some of them I just did because I had nothing to do at the time. And I was just like, I'll turn this short story into a novel and that is in itself is going to help you. Yeah, it's the same way with scripts. Some scripts you're going to experiment with. Maybe you're always trying to find out something about yourself. So maybe you're trying to find out if you like a specific genre or not, or if you find joy in writing that genre. I recently wrote a comedy, and I don't even know if I wrote it for the purposes of showing it adding it to my portfolio, or the original reason. All I know is the original reason I started it was because I thought it would be a great script to experiment with structure of screenplay and learning structure better.
Right.
So not every project you do is there to be shown to the world or to be published or is going to be the project you want to pour your soul into.
Yeah.
I have my current book that I've been working on for a couple of years is a project where I'm going to push it until it's published. It's a story that I care about enough and am invested enough into where that's why I wrote it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think one point that you hit on that was super, super valuable to all 25 listeners that might stumble upon this. I think honestly, like doing projects for the sake of your self growth in your craft is the most important part for, let's say, the first 10 years, let's say, I mean, it is a long-term game. And like right now I've mostly done kind of fast-paced montage-y type stuff or branded work, right? And now I'm starting to think of different products that I can do to see if I'm any good at different genres, but like through those processes, you learn so much. Yeah, whatever the word is, you learn so much when you put yourself in these different situations, right? Because you have to adapt a certain way or plan a certain way. I've been working on this kind of experimental short, like, I guess, YouTube documentary vlog type of thing, right? And it was literally, it just started as an idea of basically like making a video that kind of, it acts as a resume for me, but I want to tell like a story in an abstract experimental way. And it doesn't really make any sense, but like through doing it, I'm just kind of exploring new routes. And I'm like, I've learned so much just from doing this. I don't even know if I'm ever going to release it, but like, it forced me to do things that I was not comfortable with in terms of like working on a specific genre or just putting in the effort to something that just might flop or something like that. I think it's super important because that's how you grow.
Yeah. And, you know, I don't think anyone should get us wrong. Like, believe in every project you do, for sure.
Yeah.
Or else you're not going to do it.
Right.
But
it's really hard to do anything as a half-assed investment.
I mean, but tinker, experiment, you know, do what you have to do to get your ass in the chair, or, you know, convince yourself of, you know, that your project is worthwhile, because it will be, I guarantee, I promise, you know.
Well, at least to yourself.
That's another thing I wanted to bring up to you. That's one of the topics that we were gonna also discuss. I remember, was that documenting your process, so that you don't lose those little notes and those little things that you've collected along the way. I recently started what I call my editing journal. Like I said, I've kind of come to a point right now where I'm trying to revise a lot of projects or some big projects. And I just started this editing journal, and I record new notes that I learn about the editing process every day. Whether the note I made the other day it was literally as simple as like, get up and get a snack when you're hungry, because you don't realize when you're hungry when you're editing, and then you're wasting time because you just can't even put the words together anymore because your brain is.
I like that. I like the method of actually writing it down, so you have like a whole reference of, you know, what works best for you, because it differs, you know. And I also think that journal holds you accountable, right? You're like, hey, I can't do this anymore because I'm procrastinating because I want a snack or whatever. But right here it says, I wrote this down. I've experienced this before, and I need to, you know, fine tune the way I act to sit in that chair and get it done. Right.
I kid you not. The other day I was working on some revisions, and I wrote a word, and I knew how to spell it. It was a simple word, and I tried to spell it 4 or 5 times. And I just like my fingers could not do the movement correctly. And then I realized how much I was just starving, and I had to just get up and walk away. I was like, well, this is where the problems are coming from.
Right. You get sucked in that flow state, and time disappears. And then all of a sudden you're like, did I eat today? It is 4:30.
No, it happens way too often. So be healthy as a creative person, and don't.
What's really helped me be really productive is eating really light in the morning if I have to. Sometimes I don't even eat breakfast, but like light things that keep you from processing a real heavy meal, so you can stay focused. You know what I mean? Like digesting a lot of the times, like if I have like a big breakfast or lunch even, I'm pretty slow after that. No, I agree. I'm rarely going to be writing or doing that, putting in the time that I described earlier after a big meal. It's just not going to be possible. I'm going to lay around and watch TV or go on my phone. It's like, it's, you know, I think it's pretty common for a lot of people. Long story short is optimize your schedule and prioritize your craft. All right, Micah, I know we've been talking for a little bit now, and I want to kind of wrap it all up. So before we go, I want to ask, what advice do you have to aspiring writers? Perhaps they're out of state, they're considering it. What's your advice to writers that are considering maybe moving to Los Angeles, or just are considering the craft long term?
So I think my advice is pretty simple, because I'm still striving to get to that professional level where I can eventually make my living doing this. That's my goal, like a lot of you out there. So my advice is as simple as, take advantage of the fact that this particular craft, if we're talking about writing, is it's very accessible. So it is what I believe to be the most accessible form of art. It's as simple as pulling up a Word document, opening a page in a notebook, to get things rolling. It's always right there in front of you. So you don't really have an excuse to not do it if it's what you want to do.
Right.
You have to, put yourself out there, and you have to, and there is a lot of anxieties that come with trying it and stuff like that. But if you think it's worth it and you've tried it enough and practiced enough, send your stuff to people, and get eyes on it. Cause they're going to tear you apart, cause it's their job. The good people that you send your work to, the other fellow writers, but that is their job. And they're not doing it to hurt you. They're doing it to make you better. Just look at it as the process it is. It's not something that's going to be finished right away. You're going to have to work and build it like anything else.
Yeah. So. I love that, because there's always this conception that you have to have permission to do something, right? Like if you want to be a writer, if you want to be a filmmaker, you have an iPhone that has a camera, like you can do it. There's very limited barriers to entry. It's the fact of putting in the hours and committing, you know what I mean? I think that's a lot of it is just committing to, I'm going to do this over an extended period of time. And I know that if I focus the majority of my energy into it down the road, I know something beneficial could potentially come up,
Yeah. There are people who write flash fiction out there. Their stories are some stories are one sentence long, and it's still a story. It's still worth, it was still worth writing, and they're out there, you can read them. There's a beginning, middle, and end to what the person wrote, and it's one sentence long. So,
no matter how simple it is, just do it.
Yeah. No one's asking you to be elegant or an amazing right away. We're all far from that right now. So
love it, man. All right. Yep. So I'm going to let you go. Thank you for your time, Mr. Micah. Enjoy Utah, and I hope to see you back in Los Angeles very soon after this.
I will be back soon. I promise.
Pandemic, man.
Yeah.
All right, dude. Take it easy.